Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're looking at the riches of the rain. It's a story that asks a pretty profound question. What if the literal worst day of your life was actually the exact thing you needed to save it? We're going to break down all the twists and turns of this narrative, exploring the deeper themes of karma, empathy, and destiny that are woven throughout the source material. By the end of this, you might just find yourself looking at the very concept of wealth in an entirely new light. Okay, let's dive into the central mystery. How did a relentless, totally destructive rainstorm become the greatest blessing in a poor laborer's life? Usually when we picture endless flooding rains in a farming village, we just think of absolute devastation, right? And, well, for our protagonist, Tiru, it for sure starts out that way. But as you'll see, a chain of what looks like just completely disastrous events actually paved the way for ultimate fortune. Let's kick things off with Section 1. The weight of the storm, Diru's relentless struggle. To really grasp the payoff of this story, we've got to set the incredibly desolate scene drawn from our source material. Imagine this. Diru and his deeply supportive wife, Kajri, are trapped. They're stuck in this tiny, leaky house by a storm that's been raging for a solid week. Out of pure, sheer desperation, Diru is forced out into the torrential downpour just to beg for work. But here's the thing. His struggles, they aren't just financial. They're deeply, deeply emotional. The villagers are just incredibly cruel to him. They literally yell, "You are a jinx, you're an orphan. That's why you have no family, no relatives." It's brutal. The text really highlights this harsh social isolation Diru faces day in and day out. He's not just fighting the weather and poverty, he's fighting a community that treats him like a total outcast. Honestly, it just makes his internal resilience all the more remarkable. Just look at how fast the odds stack against him here. A week ago, this relentless rain starts, which totally halts his daily wages. Then, yesterday evening, and this is just heartbreaking, the few paper notes he'd managed to scrape together, they literally disintegrate and tear apart because the leaky roof soaked them. So this morning, absolutely desperate, Diru pushes through a severe fever just to go work in the rain at the local landlord's warehouse. And then finally this afternoon, he's so weak he ends up dropping a heavy sack of grain straight into the floodwaters. I mean, it is just a total cascade of misery. Moving right along to Section 2, welcoming the strangers, warmth in the coldest times. Right in the middle of Diru's absolute darkest, most exhausting day, we get this huge pivotal moment. He's heading home through the severe weather, and he spots this mysterious couple, Ramen and Janki, just shivering and completely stranded under a tree. And this brilliantly illustrates a core moral contrast. Think about it. Diru is impoverished, essentially starving, facing total ruin. Yet, he is completely abundant in basic humanity. Without even a second thought, he invites these strangers in. Now, contrast that with Talker Darjan Pratap, the local landlord Diru works for. The talker has immense material wealth, massive grain warehouses, the whole shebang. But he's entirely devoid of empathy and notoriously cruel to anyone suffering. It's such a striking juxtaposition of what true richness actually looks like. And Dira's wife, Kajri, she is entirely on the same page. When he brings total strangers into their home, she doesn't freak out about their dwindling food supply, not at all. Instead, she just says, "Guests are a form of God, it is our duty." Using literally the very last of their resources, she joyfully cooks up a feast for Ramen and Janki, simply because, well, it's the right thing to do. They're offering warmth and friendship to people they genuinely believe are just as poor and helpless as they are. And that brings us to Section 3, the cruel decree, the climax of despair. So remember that ruined sack of grain from earlier? Yeah, the narrative tension hits its absolute peak here. Some malicious laborers drag Diru right in front of Thakur Durjan Pratap to report the mistake. And the landlord's reaction? It is swift and merciless. He doesn't just fire Diru for making a mistake while sick. No, he demands an impossible compensation, 3 times the value of this single ruined sack. 3 times. It's this tyrannical decree clearly designed to just completely crush Diru. He gets thrown out into the rain and told never to return unless he has the money. I mean, really ask yourself, how is a penniless, starving laborer supposed to pay back a debt 3 times the cost of a grain sack? He has no job, 0 savings. Remember, his money literally melted in the rain. And on top of all that, he has extra mouths to feed at home with his guests. The source material paints a picture of just absolute hopelessness here. Diru and Kajri go to sleep that night hungry, crying, completely believing their lives are effectively over. Which leads us to Section 4. The merchant's secret, the first twist. The morning after the storm, the rain finally stops. The sun comes out, but Diru and Kajri are just sitting in their courtyard, utterly defeated. That is, until their house guests, Raman and Janki, walk up to them. And boom, Raman reveals his true identity. He is not a poor, stranded traveler at all. No way. He's actually a highly successful, incredibly wealthy city merchant who lacks absolutely nothing when it comes to money, property, or business. The quote-unquote helpless strangers Diru took in, they immediately step up to clear Diru's impossible debt with the talk war. Now, what's really interesting about this is Raman's motivation. He explains, "We have money, but we are poor in relationships. We hid our wealth because we feared you wouldn't treat us genuinely." You see, Raman and Janki really wanted to test the waters. They were looking for a genuine connection, totally free from all the sycophancy that usually surrounds their wealth. And Diru and Kajri? They passed this test of humanity with flying colors. They proved their hearts were pure gold. So the rewards for this selfless kindness are immediate and completely life-changing. First off, Raman pays off that impossible debt entirely, which basically allows Tiru to throw the money right back in the cruel landlord's face. Second, Raman publicly defends Tiru, completely shutting down the villagers who had been mocking him. And honestly, most importantly, he offers Tiru a trusted, highly lucrative partnership in his massive city business. Talk about a total game changer. Tiru's good karma literally changes his entire life trajectory in an instant. All right, on to Section 5, the bond of lifetimes, the final revelation. Just as Raman and Janki are getting ready to head back to the city, Kajri brings Diru this brand new shirt to wear, to celebrate his new job. As Diru takes off his old clothes, his neck is exposed, and suddenly Raman gasps. He sees this unique, congenital birthmark on Diru's neck. Why is that a big deal? Because Raman has the exact same identical mark on his own neck. Raman's mother had told him ages ago about her brother he'd lost in childhood. So the crucial point is, in this incredible twist of fate, Diru and Raman are actually long-lost brothers. Diru is no longer the lonely orphan the village mocked. He finally has the family he's always yearned for. Destiny literally brought these brothers back together through the worst storm of their lives.
Let's just take a second to look at this incredible reversal of fortune. Diru starts out orphaned, impoverished, and constantly mocked, right? But he ends up as a wealthy business partner, deeply loved, and reunited with his blood family. On the flip side, the Takor starts out wealthy, powerful, and incredibly arrogant, but by the end, he is just publicly humiliated. The source text even notes that Diru eventually completely surpasses the landlord in both wealth and status. Diru's unwavering kindness elevated him so far beyond the man who tried to crush him.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. It leaves us with a really profound question. In a world constantly chasing after wealth, are we forgetting that the true riches of life are actually humanity and family? Diru didn't win because he was greedy. He won because he gave away the very little he had to someone in need. It's just such a powerful reminder that genuine connection, empathy, and doing the right thing when no one is watching, or even when everyone is judging, is honestly the greatest currency of all. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you guys next time.